slowest promo intro ever.
I'm so mellow.
Very mellow. Just double checking that people know how to count, clearly. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning. And what a show we have for our friends today. First of all, International
Special.
Women's Day. So let me
Thank
salute
you.
Michelle. And I think, do we have 23 other women at INSOM right now?
There are 25 in total. I know that
Which
because
is,
I just put together a video that I'll be sharing shortly featuring every single one of them. So I know there are 25.
and that is about a quarter of our staff. So that's a really nice
It's a little
number.
bit
In
more.
fact.
Yep.
So
Yep, very
congratulations,
proud of
INSOM.
that.
Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you to all the women who have helped me over the years. There are a few. But wow, what a great show we have ahead in the sense that who knows what it's going to be like, because we're going to talk to ChatGPT and we're going to ask it to give. Go ahead, Michelle. Sorry.
Yeah, we are pitting Stephen against ChatGPT. Probably many of you in the audience today have been playing with it, maybe asking it to give you some code suggestions, some snippets, explain code. Who better than to test OpenAI's capabilities than Stephen Feuerstein? I'm hoping you.
And folks, you probably could guess, because if you know me for any length of time, I'm just always complaining about stuff. So anyway, I'm going to hold off on any rants about ChatGPT and LLMs and whatever the heck they are until the end. But we'll have some fun in the meantime. So the idea is that I gave you some code, right, Michelle? I gave you some code that I thought might have some issues.
Yep.
None of it that I wrote, of course, because my code has no issues.
Perfect.
Yeah. And we're gonna ask ChatGPT, or she's gonna ask. We're gonna see what it has to say, and we're gonna talk about it. And all of you, please chime in your comments, and we'll get them up there. And we'll just see how it goes. It could be that ChatGPT is gonna have a great day and knock it out of the ballpark. It might be unavailable. Who knows? Let's see.
So it was unavailable this morning, so I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. We'll see how it goes. If it's painfully slow, I do have a set of responses that I prepared earlier. So let's see how it goes. The interesting thing about GPT is that it's non-deterministic. Every time you feed it a prompt and ask it a question, it's going to likely give you a different response. So if we do GPT live, if it all works out, there's no way Stephen could have prepped for this. Really.
That's right. I have not prepped for this at all, except for the last 40 years.
So what I'm going to do is I'll share my screen and we'll take a look at, let me know if you see my screen.
We can actually start with this one, right?
With this one, I must be sharing let me just stop this for a sec. Well, we can. All right. So I'm just sharing the wrong little bit. All right. So what we did here, I'm going to just copy and paste it. Let's try it again here. All right. I'm going to do a new chat. I'm driving because, Stephen, I'm going to assume you do not actually have an OpenAI account.
Doesn't want to touch this with a
you don't want to touch this. All right. So what we're going to do is provide a prompt. Can you please describe the following PL SQL code block and provide suggestions for improving it? Right. And I'm going to let's see if the audience can even view this code.
And I've got, what we might want to do is switch over to me to look at the actual code, since we can see it in a formatted environment. So while that's coming up, in fact, why don't you switch to me?
Okay, can you share your screen then?
I will share my present screen. Yep. And there. So this is the first block of code we're looking at. So we're going to do something, and it's all exception handling. We've got when no data found. I'm getting the code and the error message, inserting into the log table, dupe file and index, raise application error. Then I've got an others doing largely the same thing. So, thought we'd see what it had to say. Okay, what does it have to say?
It's still doing its thing, but let's take a look. Wait, let me.
So I'll talk about it.
Here we go.
And you mean we have a response?
We have a response.
Okay.
Is my screen big enough? Mark, if you can shake your head and let me know.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. All right. So here it's describing it at the top. If you want to read.
So it looks like what it generally does with the pieces of code that it gets is it kind of tells you back what the code is doing at some superficial level. So do other stuff is in the executable section. No data found is ready. We'll catch the exception, insert an error message. So it's basically just literally describing the code. Okay. And it looks like it does an okay job at that. Mm-hmm.
And that moves into suggesting some improvements.
So instead of using when others, it's better to catch specific exceptions that can be handled appropriately. Excellent generic advice. Good practice to include more specific error messages. Good advice. It is recommended to use bind variables instead of concatenating values into SQL statements. Okay, so we'll switch over to me. Let's just take a look at that one very, very specifically. Can you show my screen? Yeah.
Yep.
So what they're talking about, so what ChatGPT did was identify that this is a SQL statement. Here's concatenation. That could be a problem. Now, switch back to the screen. So on the one hand, that's perfectly fine, right? That's a perfectly fine thing to tell people about. It's completely irrelevant here. There are no input parameters. That data is not coming from somewhere else. So what they're basically doing is flagging any concatenation of a string inside a SQL statement. There are worse things you can do, but it's also pretty much a distraction. It is a good practice to include the name of the procedure or function that raised the exception in the error message. Okay, so now that's an interesting one because on the one hand, yeah, you want to know, can you go up a little bit more? I mean, there is no procedure. No, go up to the,
up.
The last recommendation right there. Yeah, good practice to include the name of the procedure or function that raised the exception. So obviously, that's a good idea, but practically speaking, for people who know PL SQL, you would never pass the name of the program because you can get that from Oracle itself by calling dbms utility format error backtrace, which gives you the backtrace through all the programs that were called and the line numbers and so on. So really what they should, so my big takeaway, can you just go back to my screen? So if I was looking at this code, the most important thing that I would be talking about is, look at this. You've got almost exactly the same code twice. And what are you doing? You're inserting into a log table directly in your exception handler. No, there should be a single generic error handling procedure. And inside that generic handling procedure, it should grab all the information you can get from the environment using Oracle built-ins. So I would say, switching back to your screen now, please. I would say.
All right, we have to figure out who's driving. All right, I'll switch over to my screen.
I thought Mark was there driving.
Yeah, I think between you, Mark, me, we're all.
I'm not doing any switching. I have no admin authority.
All right.
So I would say that the takeaway from this is superficially not objectionable. Anything beyond superficially, completely unhelpful in terms of really improving my code and identifying some of the biggest problems.
Because the interesting thing about GPT is if you're not, so, it's a chat mechanism and it remembers the history up to a certain number of tokens of your conversation. It is possible to keep sort of asking it more if there are things that if you want to guide it to a certain way or focus on a specific area. Would it be worth asking it sort of a follow-up question or saying, okay, thank you. Yeah.
What would you do about all the repetitive code?
Okay, let's try that.
Now it's going to think.
Well, it told me good catch. I feel pretty good about that.
So this is pretty good. So it extracted out the common code, created a separate procedure, and now it's going to call those, I assume, in the appropriate way. All right, I give up. Let's let ChatGPT write our code. Cool. So that is really nice. So the mere follow-up would be, it extracted the common logic. So number one, it didn't notice that at first. But when we asked about it specifically, then it was able to deal with it pretty well. Again, however, it's a very superficial process, so it didn't actually, from the standpoint of domain expertise in Oracle and PL SQL, it didn't say, and if you've got a generic error logging procedure, of course you need to call these dbms utility things or util call stack things or something like that. And I think that's probably what we're going to find as we go through this whole process, is that it doesn't have domain expertise. And I suppose maybe they haven't fed it all of my blog posts and video.
We could train it. I'm sure. Well, yeah, I'm sure
not
if
sure
it's
if we'd
been
ever get
trained
there.
on PL SQL, it must have looked at your stuff pretty significantly. Judith is asking, why not have the robot or GPT write the entire code instead of just suggesting improvements? You absolutely could do that. We could have started. So it has all sorts of capabilities from, reviewing code, providing suggestions, or you could start with a use case and ask it to actually code it for you. So we could start up a new chat and ask it to.
I know, but that's even more insane.
That is more insane, but we can maybe get to that in a bit. But you absolutely could, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really good comment too. I'd be more worried about the insert statement without a commit and an exception handler. So a few things about that. I wouldn't want the commit in the exception handler. The only way I'd want to commit is if it was in a separate procedure, and I can make that procedure an autonomous transaction, which also ChatGPT did not catch. That should be an autonomous transaction procedure, saving the log error. Oh, there's Nils with exactly that comment. Thank you, Nils. Yep, on the mark. And Judith, I'm pretty sure you were being kind of sarcastic about having the robot write the entire code base, but I think that we are getting close to the point where you could say something like, build me a CRM application that does blah, blah, blah. And you know what? It might produce thousands of lines of code. And then what are you going to do with that? I mean, you can't. I'm sorry, the ranting is at the end. Okay, shall we look at another piece of code? That's right.
So how about, Stephen, you pull up your screen with the second procedure we'll be looking at, and I'm going to run it in GPT while you're doing that.
So are we doing string tracker?
We can do string tracker, yes.
String tracker. Okay, so you're sharing my screen? Share my screen.
Mark, I'll let you drive. We are sharing your screen, Stephen.
Oh, yeah, we are. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at string tracker, which is this classic little package I put together to basically highlight how useful it is to use string index collections. So there's not a lot here, but we've got some collections, and we've got basically this piece of code. This is what I'm really interested to see what it will say, that iterates through the array looking for a match. And as some of you may know, if you attended any of my talks over the last 20 or 30 years, you could make this much simpler by going to a string index collection. And then string in use becomes nothing more than this basically single line of code that got a little bit too fancy. So what do we got?
It's literally still thinking about it.
Okay.
It's working.
And this, I would say, I'll be really amazed if they actually recommend changing the type of data structure and so on and so forth. But again, that's kind of like what I'm looking for, is how far it can understand and give you useful feedback. So, okay, well, I'll go back to stop sharing my screen. Thanks. Okay. To track and manage a list of strings. So again, it's basically just reiterating what the code is.
I can go back to, let me pull up the bit that should we letting it work? I did get an output earlier.
So use more descriptive names that convey their purpose. I thought variable name T was a darn good name. Using more descriptive names such as string list T and string value T. Okay. So basically what they're saying is, look, your package talks about tracking strings. Variable name, where does that come from? And actually it comes from the initial impetus for this package, which was to keep track of the variable names I was generating. That's an excellent piece of feedback there. Oh, complaining about my code formatting, are you? Really? Wow, I am so deeply insulted, I can't tell you. And I have blank lines between procedures and functions. I don't know. I wonder what it was complaining about. I think that's a pretty consistently formatted piece of code.
Haniel's got an interesting comment here. The magic, I'm going to use the word magic of GPT is all in the prompts, and the more specific you are with your prompts, generally the better results you're going to get. So what he's,
but if somebody doesn't know Stephen Feuerstein, they just want to know about, that's right. Cheating. They should know. In other words, ChatGPT should know that I'm the guy to go to if anybody looks at any PL SQL code.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You've put that out there. We're going to have to ask you.
So use of exceptions. It does not have any exception handling. Great reminder in general. Built-in function string use can be simplified. Ooh. So number 4. So number 4 is, I would say, the key piece of feedback. Is it still working on doing more? No, it's done, right?
I mean, it looks like it's still.
So look, so they looked at the string and it looked at the string and use function, and they talked about simplifying it within string. I mean, what? So I think that's a really bad piece of advice there. But you're right. It looks like it's not quite done yet.
It's yeah. I might stop here. I can get it to try again. But there's a few people that are asking me to ask GPT who's the expert to go to.
That's right. They want to expose me as a fraud. Okay, fine. Go ahead. Ask. Who's the best expert on PL SQL to talk to, or something like that? Larry Allison. Say on Oracle PL SQL. I want to see if Oracle picks up something.
Oh, sorry about the slowness. We need to start paying for GPT. Oh. Here. So this happens.
That sounds like I'll offend somebody. I'm not going to answer that one.
I shouldn't have asked it about the resources.
Ooh, Oracle Learning Library. I've got some friends at Oracle who would be really excited to see that. That's nice. So, pretty generic scan. Oracle Magazine is vastly out of date. And what's missing? So what do we know that's missing from this? There's my stuff, yeah.
All right.
No Oracle base. Wow. Are you out of touch ChatGPT or what? How could you answer that without an Oracle base reference?
It looks like Steve Neelish. So here, depending on the prompt, and you get different answers every time. But Neelish
and Bryn Llewellyn, no way. All history. Okay.
All right. Should we keep going?
Let's keep going.
So we've lost our history now because so we'll have to start over. Let me grab the next bit. So if you want to share, we'll move on to process employee.
Okay. So process employee. This is actually a piece of code I put together to ask my attendees at my class, find all the hard codings. So this is a discussion of what constitutes a hard coding in your code, and therefore things that we need to change. So there's so many problems in this code from that standpoint. It'll be really interesting to see what it says. I'll just leave it here for people to look at.
It's still running, but I'm going to pull up the version from before that I have in my Word document, just because it's really, really slow.
And if you could stop sharing my screen, we'll get away from infinity.
All right, let me just pull this up.
Could you put a Judith's comment? So sure, lots of dependencies, lots of things to keep in mind as you ask an artificial intelligence questions. Okay.
All right. So here from process employee. So it's still working here. It seems to have picked up a little bit. So descriptive names.
Why don't you go over to the Word doc and we can start looking at those.
All right.
Obviously, Microsoft needs to invest another $100 billion and get these computers working faster, which is another thing to rant about. How much fossil fuels are being consumed by us playing with ChatGPT. Okay, so skip the description. Let's go down to the recommendations. Consider adding input validation to ensure the department ID is not known of the correct data type. So talking about is of the correct data type is silliness in Oracle because it's a strongly typed language. And if it's not the correct data type, you won't even get there. Consider using a more descriptive name for Emson depth cur, whatever. Using explicit cursor names, explicit column names. I have no idea what that is. Better naming convention. True, they're inconsistent. Yep. So, yeah, not really very interesting. I mean, they're all kind of high-level stuff. So switch back to my screen, please. So, the kind of things that I would be looking at is you got a formula inside your select statement. Should that be extracted out? You got hard coding. So it didn't talk about hard codings at all, did it?
No. And I'm looking at the more recent, it's still working in the GPT window at the moment, and it doesn't have anything about hard coding. Some of the
It also
similar
didn't say
things.
anything about row by row fetching, which is interesting because the example we can look at from Adrian Ping's blog post does address that, but this is an
Oh,
obvious.
it is here. Let me just switch over to my window.
Sure.
So here it's
Great. Excellent. For all. Yeah, no, but a for all is irrelevant. Okay, interesting. So for all, it says like the for all, but it's a query only loop. Add error handling for the cursor. No.
You don't seem very impressed, Stephen.
Well, you didn't expect me to be too impressed, right? Use parameterized exceptions instead of calling must be CO procedure directly. Consider raising a custom exception. What? Well, first of all, there's no such thing as a parameterized exception. Consider raising a custom exception with a parameter that indicates the. Okay, I don't even understand that. But also, number 2, use bind variables in the cursor. It's so switch over to me. So what they did was notice that this is not declared as a parameter. In fact, it's not. Oh, it's declared here. So it's true that it's not a bind variable for the cursor, but it's certainly a bind variable in terms of SQL. And there's no issues of, hard coding a literal value. So that seems to be off key completely. And was there anything about hard codings like that?
No.
Can you switch back? That's surprising to me because that's one of the basics, right? You want to avoid all these literal values and so on. So that's interesting. Okay. All right. It's 11:23. Do you want to keep looking at examples? Do you want to switch over to conclusions? Actually, let's do the last one.
You want to do the last one? All right. So you share. Let's share. Mark, if you can share Stephen's screen, I'll do the.
So this is another. This is another classic piece of code in which I've got a for loop with a couple of different DML statements in it. So this basically is ripe for a for all rewriting. In fact, what I'd love to do is ask them to rewrite this.
Oh, okay.
Rewrite it to improve performance. That will be interesting. And can you switch back to? And let's see, do we have any other comments? Judith, the best advice is to learn one is the one who's, yep. I think one of the things we felt in the earlier phases of human existence is that you learn from people whose knowledge and experience you trust. And there are problems with that. That's gatekeeper stuff. And we're really down on gatekeepers this time, right? So for example, Stephen's the number one expert on PL SQL. So everybody has to go talk to Stephen. And if Stephen doesn't like your code, then your code is bad. Obviously, that's bad, right? So there are downsides to narrowly basing your trust into a small number of people. But it seems like one of the things we've done with where we are going with social media, clearly, and AI is, You can trust anybody and everybody, and it's up to you to sort it out. So one way to improve the procedure is to use a single SQL statement. Yeah, well. So again, good generic advice. If you can do it in a SQL statement and not use PL SQL, great. But that would be a massive mistake in this piece of code. Can you switch back to me for a sec? So it'd be a big mistake here because we've got the insert, we've got the update. They want to take it all out of this loop and do it in bulk SQL, straight SQL. But we've got all of this other stuff going on here that it's not able to, it can't compensate for. So I think that would be, does it, in the code that it's generating, can you switch back to?
Yep, you've got my screen up.
Does it talk about in the code above? See, there's the adjust compensation call, right? Call? Whoa. Okay.
It's mixing languages here.
SQL% bulk row count. Scroll up a little bit further. Huh. So it's saying insert all the history rows, update all the employee rows, and then for anything that you had an error on, adjust the compensation. Interesting.
Why for everything you had an error on? I'm not seeing that.
So switch back to my code. So what I did was insert a row, adjust the compensation, update the employee with that compensation. So what they're saying is do all of this at once for the entire department. Do all of this for the entire department. And then if there were any errors trying to do this, if this encountered an error on any individual row, it would put it into the bulk row counter, and then we're going to run this for every one of those. Now, switch back. That's interesting. I mean, it's a pretty sophisticated rethinking it. I don't think it's appropriate. And also, you can't say for all call a procedure.
Right.
Or if you can, you don't want to because it's just like doesn't make any sense, even if Oracle might allow it. But I'm pretty sure it won't even allow it. I think if you did a begin end, it might do it, but it won't do it in bulk. Yeah.
So Stephen, all in all, your feeling of some of the reviewing capabilities are pretty generic. Some things it got wrong, but it missed some significant things that maybe a one-on-one review with Stephen Feuerstein would have revealed.
For lots of people, can you stop sharing the screen, Mark? So, because I think it's time to just draw some conclusions, right? So, I'd say that's consistent with the little bits I've seen. So first of all, I have a very strong bias against all this stuff. In a very high level sense of we know what technology can do, which is a tremendous amount of damage. And we know that if we don't put any boundaries on how people use technology, they do even more damage. So we've seen that with social media. We've seen it with nuclear stuff. Just the list goes on and on. Technology gives a lot to humans, takes away from every other form of life on this planet besides humans and dogs and cats and cockroaches. But we're going to forge on ahead to the latest, greatest fun thing. And we seem to never learn our lessons. And here we are in the midst of this major destruction of democracy around the world, largely through or enabled and energized by social media. And we're going to turn AIs loose. And the one thing that AIs can do better than anything, proven right now, right, is generate misinformation. That's literally what it does. Just received your 6th edition book. Great. When and if we ever do a 7th edition, and I think it's unlikely due to O'Reilly's lack of interest, it would go through 23C, just so you guys know. But I don't know if that'll happen. Yeah, Ben, it could be that ChatGPT's understanding of PL SQL influenced by PostgreSQL. I mean, there's certainly probably more PL SQL code and content that's been written over the years to feed into ChatGPT than Postgres. So I don't know if that's necessarily the case. But, honestly, Michelle, the thing that I don't understand is that what we know about ChatGPTs, all these LLMs, is that they will generate bad information, literally fabrications. And they sound really good. So you match up, sounds pretty good, with you can't trust anything it says. without going to a trusted source to validate it. And like, how is this not bad news? I just don't.
So I'd love to hear from people. I mean, we're sort of running out of time, but I'd love to hear. I found it extremely helpful, sort of to get me started in some projects, whether it's on the marketing side, whether it's even on the coding side. The other day, I asked it to give me the make rest request, give me the syntax, and it got it right. I even had it validated. So I think that's the key is don't take it, don't assume that it's correct, that it's, but I think using it as a tool is really interesting.
So use it as a tool to generate a starting point that you cannot trust and have to go over in detail. I mean, right? I mean, if you went to somebody in your,
that you can't be sure 100% is, but we're developers. We can give it a try and see, and we can also learn as we're. I don't know. I'd love to hear from others. I think that there's. I'm not saying there aren't a lot of things to be concerned about, to have in the back of your mind, but I do think there's some exciting applications. There's some good use cases.
I mean, there's not a piece of technology we haven't invented that doesn't have its good sides. No question. The problem is if generation after generation of technology, we say, yeah, there were some good things to that, like Facebook. There are some great aspects to Facebook. My wife's in touch with her high school friends and family she wouldn't normally hear from. But if the price of getting some little goodies is the devastation of democratic processes around the world, bad trade. ChatGPT, it'll produce a blog post for me, it'll produce marketing content, because I mean, it's great for marketing content, right? That's just this anyway. But
oh, that hurt.
Well, I'm known as the marketing author at O'Reilly. I have a lot of respect for marketing and promotion people, but I'm just saying it. That's what it is. That's literally what it is.
There's a bit of that.
So it's a perfect fit. But again, if we can get some advantages out of that, but the flip side is that it becomes a pervasive purveyor of misinformation, deepfakes. I mean, we're already seeing videos that are produced out of these tools that are virtually indistinguishable for any of us. Sure. Mm-hmm. From real videos of real people with their voices, their idioms. I mean, we couldn't trust anything on the internet already. We're heading into, I think, a much darker place. And the idea, so my point is that these technologies come along and we just keep saluting them and, oh, it's so exciting and oh my God, and we don't think about how they should not be let loose for a long time yet. We'll be overwhelmed by the negatives. We're about to be completely overwhelmed by the negatives. But, it's amazing to see this happening and so quickly. I mean, natural language support on translations and voice. I mean, these are things that we didn't think would be happening for decades. Is that good? I guess I don't have to type as much when I'm texting now. But, we never look at, there's no balancing act. There's no effort to draw lines around things, because human society, especially in our capitalist era, is all about, you got to make progress, you got to make change. Otherwise, as soon as things stop changing, they start dying, especially your profits. And that drive for change is incredibly destructive. So.
You said you'd keep your rant to the end, and you did.
I did, right?
Yeah. So where do we go from now? Do you have anything to share with the audience about Feuertips, about...
Yeah, we're turning it over to ChatGPT. So we're going to get back on our bi-weekly schedule. Every 2 weeks, you will see something that looks like me appearing before you, telling you who knows what.
That's the way to drive
that's not
viewership up.
So we're still finalizing plans, but it's looking pretty good. I think what we're going to start doing, we'll probably still do Feuertips occasionally. Okay. But what I'd like to do is start up a monthly live code review session. And I'm recruiting some brave souls who want to show me their code, or I'll show them my code. And we'll have an online conversation, just kind of like we did now, but not with ChatGPT,
right, but
with another trusted source. And we'll talk about variations in code and different approaches and trade-offs and so on. And we won't have to wait for the little text to come out. So hopefully that'll be of interest to people. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And if any of you do feel like you'd like me to look at your code and review it online, let me know.
Yeah.
Or not even your code. It can be somebody else's really nasty code. You can always blame it on somebody else. No problem whatsoever. I mean, absolutely. It can give you a jump start. I mean, it can jumpstart a blog post. It can jumpstart a piece of code. But think about it. I have a requirement like I need a CRM system. So build me a package that will manage the employees table. It will probably produce something. You have to go over it line by line by line. It's really not clear to me that ChatGPT is going to be the fastest way to do that. For example, if you're an Apex developer, or even if you're not, you can do some very basic data modeling in your head. You can go to Quick SQL, and in a few short minutes, you can lay out and generate the DDL that you need for your entire data model.
Yeah,
And then
it's
you
pretty
can generate
impressive.
applications in Apex around that, and you can trust this stuff mostly. But so in other words, I think there's already, yes, it doesn't replace experts. And if it doesn't replace experts, here's the question. What is it replacing? How is it really helping? All right. Well, I hope that wasn't, too negative and
No, and I hope
entertaining.
people enjoyed the
Yeah.
the show. I thought it was an interesting
I like Ben's
pitch.
comment. I found everyone as a GPT
Yes.
rant these days. Well, we should all have rants about it. We should have rants about lots of things. Oh my God. We should be ranting about so much. We'd be doing nothing but ranting. Look at people in this country and the UK and so on. They're losing their rights, their human rights, left and right. And Israel, since Judith is there. Whoa. So yes, rant away, rant publicly. Let your voice be heard. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, everyone. Have a wonderful International Women's Day. Kiss your mom, kiss your wife. Don't kiss your colleagues.
And I would just like to finish with thank you, Insum, for letting me rant on your time.
Always a pleasure. Have a great
Take care,
day,
everybody.
everyone. Thanks. Bye.